Alright, so welcome to an impromptu video I decided to make about redrawing Europe's borders based on my opinion. For those of you who haven't picked up on it yet, I am a huge history nerd, and it is my passion, and it is essentially my life. So I decided that based on videos that I've seen from other people, I would do something similar. Now, most of them have largely taken it as a fun kind of pseudo-historical project, but my intention is to create a European map which could realistically survive in the modern world. Obviously, I don't know everything, and therefore my beliefs and opinions and ideas may not accurately reflect the actual situation in Europe, because while I am a history nerd, I am also an American who has never set foot in any territory without the Star-Spangled Banner above it. So, with that said, here we go. Now, despite what I just said, well, this is a map of modern Europe. In case you didn't know, this is the map that I'll be using as the base for what I change. So we got a good look at it. Sorry that it's a little bit blurry, but this is where it's going to get a little wonky. Now, as I was just saying, despite what I said, my opinion is actually pure and objective fact, and therefore I recommend that you show this video to all of these people, because I believe that they will 100% agree with the objective facts that I am saying in this video, and they, as well as all other people, understand that this is actually the best thing for Europe, and I am a perfect and entirely correct expert on European demographics and history. So with everything said, let's go to the first thing. I decided that starting with Iberia, starting small, I would unite Iberia in this scenario. I believe that this makes sense because there's a lot of similarity between the Spanish and Portuguese languages, and especially their history, even more so than the relationship between, say, Spanish and French, or Romanian and Italian. It makes geographical sense, as Portugal and Spain are very closely connected and both isolated via the Iberian Peninsula. And also, there's historical examples to improve on. The Iberian Union actually existed briefly in the 16th and 17th centuries, and if the things that went wrong with that union were to be remedied, I think that an effective, say, federative state between Spain and Portugal could represent both groups in a way that would allow for a united and powerful state to exist in Iberia for the better of both societies. Now, the next change I decided to make was with France and the lowlands, where I ceded northern Catalonia to Iberia, as this was a region, well, I'll explain in a second, I suppose. I ceded southern Belgium, also known as Wallonia, to France, and I also ceded northern Belgium, which is known as Flanders, to the Netherlands. Additionally, I gave Savoy, Nice, and Corsica to Italy, which I will discuss in a moment, but which will also be shown on the map of Central Europe in a few slides. Now, the reasons for this is that the aforementioned regions, which I ceded away from France to other countries around it, were largely taken due to strategic and military reasons. I misspelled reasons right there. Not due to historical ties. A lot of these regions had non-French inhabitants, like northern Catalonia was mostly Catalonian when it was ceded. Savoy and Nice had significant Italian resistance against the French annexation, which was done largely for political reasons. And the French largely had to go through a gradual process of French immigration and integration to make these regions the modern core French territories that they're considered to be today. In regards to Wallonia, Wallonia speaks French and is culturally tied to France, mostly through that. Now, Belgium is a functioning and capable state, but there are significant movements to divide the country, and I feel that, considering the fact that, from how I've seen it, the Belgian identity as as strong as it is, was largely developed in resistance to Dutch mismanagement during the Belgian Revolution, I feel that a remedy for some of the Belgian separatism and a realistic possibility, if we put aside the methodology towards reaching this kind of scenario, it could be reasonable to divide Belgium between these two states and also to give some territory to Germany, which I will explain later. Additionally, similarly to that, the Flemish in the north speak Dutch, and they are culturally tied to the Netherlands. So I also believe that they would be able to function as essentially as much of a part of the Netherlands as, say, Holland or what is it? I'm blanking on the name, but the northern part, Frisia. So the next changes that I made to Northern Europe, going a little bit more broad here, is to unite Ireland, to create a Scandinavian union, and to unite the Finns of Russia, Finland, and also Estonia. Now, the reasons for this is that I left Iceland alone because it's culturally, linguistically, and historically separated from Scandinavia. The Scandinavian languages, though not necessarily 100% mutually intelligible, are very closely linked, but Icelandic languages and also culture as well are not as closely intertwined with Scandinavia as the Scandinavian states are with each other. Therefore, I think that since it's doing all right already, it was fine to leave it on its own. I decided to unite Ireland and Great Britain based on geography, which means giving Northern Ireland to the Irish. The reason for this is because in recent times, and also when they were starting to push for independence, there has been a significant movement to unite Northern Ireland with Ireland, which I personally feel is one that, since it's growing in strength at its current trajectory, seems like it's going to occur, so I might as well make it happen now. And also, that makes the states more cohesive geographically and provides for more security for the Irish, but also I don't even really know where I was going for this. It really is just more security for the Irish. In regards to Great Britain, most people would usually divide them up, usually by making Scotland or even Wales independent. But in this case, I decided to keep them together because the geographical unity means that they can cooperate easier than, say, the British could, even with the Irish. What was I going to say? I feel that also because of how dominant England is on the island itself, combined with its decline in naval and international affairs, England's influence is largely focused on how its population and economic strength overwhelms Wales and Scotland. And their unity means that they can all necessarily work together. Though this is a very, very shaky argument, and it's very, very easy and, in my opinion, reasonable to divide Scotland and Wales from England, should you wish. But personally, even just because I think it looks nice on the map, I decided to keep Great Britain unified. I also decided to unify Scandinavia because they share many linguistic traits between the languages and are culturally similar. Plus, Scandinavia has at many points in history been united. 2 different times there was what was called the Kalmar Union between the states, where they were all ruled by one monarch. And I believe that since those largely fell apart due to conflicts between the nobility and the monarch, between the different states, rather than sheer cultural and linguistic difference, that a more properly divided Scandinavia, where there's a very much established equal base between them, could be a successful state, especially because the regions are very wealthy and are well positioned strategically in Europe. Lastly, I united the Finnic groups. This was more of an aesthetic choice because Estonia could also very easily be incorporated into a Baltic Union, which I'll explain later. But I think that since the Uralic Finnic groups are more unique to this area, like they're surrounded by the Scandinavians, the Slavs, and the Balts to the south, that it could make sense to unite them all into one group. And there's also some historic movements which push for this kind of thing. But as I said a second ago, there are various things, like you could make Karelia its own country because they do have some cultural uniqueness from Finland. You could just give Finland back its 1939, or I suppose it would be let's just say 1936 territories, which is something that the Finns fought for in World War II, for example. Not necessarily the idea of a greater Finland that's kind of put forth here in this scenario. And, there are a lot of different things that you can do with this, but I just decided to unite them. The next thing I decided to do was in regards to Central Europe and Italy. As I mentioned earlier, I gave Corsica, Nice, and Savoy to the Italians. I decided to leave Switzerland alone, which I'll explain in a second. I decided to unite the Germans, which would be primarily Germany and Austria, but this also includes Luxembourg and a little part of Belgium that was left over that is majority German and speaks German. I decided to unite the Western Slavs, which includes Poland, Czechia, and Slovakia, while also giving Southern Slovakia to the Hungarians, because Southern Slovakia, well, I'll explain this in a moment. So, as I just said, I united the Germans. I think that while this is a touchy idea, especially considering the history behind it, with how the modern German and Austrian states have approached their past and how they've outwardly rejected those ideologies on a governmental level, I think that a united Germany done in a peaceful manner would be a successful state that could be an effective world partner. I also think that Zapadoslavia, which was a hypothetical union between the aforementioned states, could be a powerful bloc within Europe. And I think that the unity between not only ethnic background but also historical ties could lead these groups to effectively, I guess, co-govern a state together, like how Yugoslavia was thought to be when it was first formed. I decided to give Southern Slovakia to Hungary, as I said earlier, just because, ethnicity. In a crazy, wacky world where, like, a World War III similar to the Second World War happened, it would stop any, cultural tensions, and also, in a way, it would kind of remove the need to account for the Hungarian minority, which is right across the border from Hungary itself, from the government, which means that those Hungarians can, I would assume, what they desire would be to be represented by a Hungarian government, which is run by Hungarians for Hungarians. I gave the culturally Italian, there's an asterisk that I'll explain in a moment, regions to Italy, because I think that these regions are more closely tied to the Italian state, and there was a significant chance for these regions to be included in Italy when it was uniting. I should have capitalized Italy there. Jesus, it's typos everywhere. The reason that I put an asterisk there was because some of the regions that I gave to Italy are not necessarily Italian as much as other regions are, like, Naples and Emilia-Romagna. I'm butchering these names so bad. I'm sorry to any Italians watching. They are undoubtedly Italian. They're part of Italy. They're always considered part of Italy. They're core Italian regions. They speak Italian. They share many cultural values. They have the same government, for example. But there are differences. Like, for example, Corsica has many differences from Italy that have emerged partially from its long-standing political separation from the rest of Italy, but also just because of its geographical separation. Same with how Sardinia is different to Italy today and how Sicily is different from Italy today. And then especially Malta is a place where, due to its geographical location, has had many different ethnicities come and kind of put their own 2 cents into what is now known as the Maltese people. So really, Malta is kind of a melting pot of ethnicities, but because a lot of the modern Maltese people are descended from Italian immigrants, and also because the state is geographically and culturally somewhat close to Italy, I decided that it kind of made sense to give it to them, especially since I've been purging microstates anyways. And in accordance with, in reference to how I've been purging microstates, Monaco would become part of Italy. San Marino would become part of Italy. The Vatican would become part of Italy. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but Andorra is annexed by Spain, and Liechtenstein would be annexed by the Swiss. And moving on to the next region, which is the Balkans, probably the most controversial of all regions. And this is probably a very controversial move, but I decided to create a enlarged and reformed Yugoslavia. Before I explain that, I also gave Cyprus to the Greeks and annexed Moldova to Romania. The reason for this, starting with Moldova and Romania, is that the two are very similar. They share many historical. They share, basically an entire common history. They were at one point completely united between World War I and World War II. Their languages are extremely similar to the point that some people debate that Moldovan is just a dialect of Romanian, and some people consider them to be the same ethnicity, though Moldova does have some unique differences, which sets it apart. But in this case, I decided to unite them. In regards to Yugoslavia, in a perfect world, which is what I imagine this would be, and ideally, a reformed and enlarged Yugoslavia, which is capable of accurately representing the wishes of all the constituent nationalities of the Southern Slavic Union, would provide for regional stability, as the disputes between territory between like Croatia and Serbia, or Bosnia and Serbia and etc., would be contained within a single state, and therefore could even be deteriorated so far as much that the core government of Yugoslavia represents all the South Slavs, so there's no reason to really argue about it. However, I do understand that this was also the idea behind the original Yugoslavia, and that this could also really, really go wrong. But simultaneously, I don't want to piss off the Balkaners any more than I already have by trying to figure out the cluster truck of the Balkans as it is today. So honestly, I think Yugoslavia is probably the least controversial thing I could do with the Balkans, even though in and of itself, half of the Balkaners watching this video probably want me to shut the hell up. I gave Cyprus to the Greeks because Cyprus has many historical and ethnic ties to Greece, even though there is a large Turkish minority in the north, which has been the subject of a lot of geopolitical tension between Greece and Turkey. I think that it would make the most sense, and has even been supported by Cypriots in recent history, that Cyprus should be incorporated into the Greek state. Though, of course, as Turkey has raised concerns over this, the Turkic minority would have to be accounted for, perhaps with autonomy, but it would be up to the Greeks in this alternate scenario. Now, finally, is Eastern Europe, which, as you can see here, I largely left alone, which I will also explain in a moment. The two things that I did change were uniting Lithuania and Latvia into a Baltic Union and creating a sort of Slavic Prussia. I call it Prussia because I feel like Kaliningrad is too associated with Russian rule over the region, as the name itself is a reference to a Bolshevik leader. But there really isn't any other like established names that I could find. So I just named it Prussia because that's the historical name for the region. And from what I could tell, the Russian translation of Prussia was literally just Prussia, phonetically. So the reason that I decided to separate Kaliningrad is because it's just geographically separated from Russia. To me, it doesn't make very much sense for the Russians to hold on to the region. And it only exacerbates, tensions as Russia looks to secure Kaliningrad from outside threats, and other nations around Russia are worried of Russian rule in Kaliningrad leading to Russian overreach in the region. So this is definitely influenced by past events and modern Russian rhetoric, so this might be completely irrelevant, like even 5 years from now. But I think it makes the most sense for Kaliningrad, specifically because of its geographical separation, but also because of the geopolitical uncertainty it causes, to become its own state. I united Latvia and Lithuania because they have a lot of shared history, but mostly because they're ethnically similar. They're both Baltic in origin, which is really the only as I've probably inferred, what am I trying to say? As I've pretty much insinuated by now, the only reason I'm uniting them is because of common ethnic background. You could just as easily leave them disunited, but that's just my opinion. So, apologies. This is the final map. Every nation is labeled, and I think it looks pretty good. But let me know what you think in the comments. So some quick statistics. There are 21 fewer nations. Europe has 44 nations today, and there are only 23 nations on this map. There are 7 completely new nations which didn't exist beforehand, and there are only 6 nations left unchanged. However, 100% of Europeans are angry at me. So thank you for watching. I appreciate if you watch through the entire video. Your support is very much appreciated, especially since this is a smaller channel. Please, if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. It means a lot. And leave an angry comment if you would like me to reorganize your borders next. Have a nice day.